All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We are talking about career transitioning today and specifically identifying your transferable skills. So today I'm going to be your moderator. I'm Kristen Slowinski. I'm the founder and managing partner of Biofluent Communications, and we are a group of scientists turned writer, and our agency specializes in marketing content for the biotech industry. So I actually pivoted from bench research at the Salk Institute, where I got my PhD. And I actually was a recruiter for a little while, which has helped me put together a little talk for you. And then I transitioned to public relations, marketing, and science writing. So this is a little guide on how to identify your transferable skills. Now, especially if you're early in your career, I don't think it's a good idea to just write down a bunch of transferable skills that you might have when you don't even know what you're going to transfer them to. So I think first you need to really set a goal. And by a goal, I mean you need to pick a few different jobs that you want to apply to. So how do you set this goal? Well, you need to read a ton of job listings and do research on positions on LinkedIn. If you already don't know what you want to do next, you need to start broad in your searches and just click and read, and keep going until you've learned a little bit more about the landscape. And once you've learned some more, you want to do some informational interviews with people on LinkedIn. Just send them requests. Probably 1 out of 2 people or 1 out of 3 people will actually give you the informational interview, but that's totally fine. I do a lot of them. And once you've got enough information, you can choose 1 to 3 types of positions to apply to. And so don't get stressed about finding these exact positions. Just choose 3 and go forward, and you can always come back and reset your goal. So you want to then identify the job fundamentals once you have these positions in mind. So you dissect that job listing line by line. You can use ChatGPT to research terms that you don't understand and boil it down to those fundamentals, and go back to those informational interviews, do more within that field, and find the nitty gritty. And I'll just keep coming back and saying fundamentals of that position. What does it really take? What are those actual skills? And I want to reiterate to write everything down, because then you're going to match your own experiences to these fundamentals. And I want to remind you to draw from all of your experiences, not just from your current job or your past jobs, but outside of that. Maybe you were in customer service when you were 18, or maybe you write for a newsletter that is for rock music. I had an interviewee for science writing, and her qualification was that she wrote for a rock music magazine, and that was good enough for me. That was absolutely a transferable skill. And if you're kind of confused or lost, you can always discuss with a friend or colleague. It's very helpful to talk about this stuff out loud. And if you find that you're not getting these matches to the experiences and there's just a lot more required for that job, you can always go back and reset your goal and find something else. But when you do find something you want to apply to, you need to update your resume. So you need to demonstrate those skills with actual real-world examples. And I'll give you some examples of that in the next slide. Use the keywords from the job listings or the fundamental keywords, and include a summary of relevant experience at the top of your resume. This is my suggestion. I'll see what the rest of the panelists think about this. So here are some examples of how you can actually write it down on your resume, how this transferable skill is going to look on there. So here's the potential position in sales. Your transferable skill is relationship building. And from a scientist's perspective, you may have been the president of X, Y, and Z student organization, and you built relationships with leadership, participants, and new recruits to increase and retain membership. This is absolutely a transferable skill that you want to spell out. The next one is a field application scientist. A skill you will need there is collaboration. So you can say that you successfully completed 3 collaborative research projects with scientists from global universities. This illustrates that point very well. A medical writer, obviously writing would be a skill that you'd want to put on there. So you wrote and edited 3 grant proposals, 4 research papers, and a series of student newsletters. You want to be quantitative whenever you can be to really illustrate exactly what you did. In quality control, you want a transferable skill is protocol adherence. We've all done that if you've done lab work, but maybe you went further and developed and administered several protocols for precise measurement of novel protein fragments. So you want to get pretty precise in what you're saying. Another thing I did here is I used words from the skills and possibly from the job description. So I built relationships. I was collaborative. I wrote. There are protocols on there, and precise measurement is something that you'll need in quality control as well. So whenever you can, use those words. So here, I dug out my resume from 2015 when I was applying to a job in public relations. I had 0 public relations experience, and I really, to be honest, didn't totally understand what public relations was, but I read as many articles as I could on it. Back then, I didn't really think about doing informational interviews, but I really should have. And so you can see I have 9 bullet points in my summary of relevant experience, and it's all talking about transferable skills because I had no actual skills in public relations. And also, so I did a LinkedIn poll just for this. And I asked people if they've ever gotten a job that they weren't actually qualified for, but they hustled their way in. And 60% of people said yes, which I'm not surprised about. I did it. I know other people who have done it. It's absolutely possible. You just kind of have to know how to sell yourself. And you sell yourself, first of all, through your resume. So I'm going to now introduce the panelists. So first we have Ruby Chima, who has 24 years of industry experience with expertise as a scientist, a project portfolio and alliance manager, and was in patient advocacy. She's led major projects at companies like Johnson & Johnson, Genentech, and Unity Biotechnologies, and is currently the Vice President of Portfolio Planning and Program Management at Viracta, a cutting-edge precision oncology company. Karen Hughes is a highly experienced professional in the field of IVDs, currently serving as the Senior Vice President of Global Regulatory and Quality at Beaufort, a leading CRO where she leads a team of seasoned regulatory professionals. After earning a PhD in chemistry, she has grown her career in research, regulatory, clinical, and quality roles at several large and startup companies. Ailey Diner has leveraged his experience as a PhD-level researcher, content writer, and SEO strategist to launch 2 businesses. The first is Word Lab. They develop SEO and content strategies for biotech companies. And his newest venture, Science Vibes, and they develop biology-inspired wall art and apparel. Pavel Ryzov has quickly grown his career from PhD researcher to roles as an application scientist, field application scientist, and now senior business development manager at Wuji Biologics. He has also recently developed a course and resource site for researchers interested in becoming a field application specialist. All right, so 9 minutes in, it's exactly what I had planned for. So I'm going to start with continuing a little bit of talk about resumes. And I want to hear from Karen first and then Ruby as hiring managers. So in the case where an applicant doesn't have direct experience and is trying to highlight their transferable skills, how do you like to see this illustrated on their resume? And can you also talk about any instances when you actually did hire someone that didn't have direct experience and what caught your attention?
So I think for me, I would say that I like to see kind of like how you described the skills, but I would like even better if you tell me why that was successful to wherever you were. So it's great that you authored or drafted X number of protocols, but what did that result in, either for the company, your newspaper, your own professional growth? What did you learn? What did the company learn? What did, how did that make a difference? Because I think it takes it one step further and explains to me how you process what success looks like and how you're driven to take what you did to the next level. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, is explain to me what it meant to the company or wherever you happen to be, or in the absence of that, what did it mean to you and how did you grow from it? The other thing is, yes, I hire people all the time that may not have the background that they think is needed for the job. And I think part of that's because in my past career, if anyone looks at my resume, it doesn't even make sense to me. So I've had people take chances on me my entire career, or what I have assumed to be chances. And so I try to do the same for others because it's worked out well for me. And I've had positive feedback that it's worked out well for organizations I've contributed to. And so I think it's really helpful. Like, I just want to know that somebody's going to work hard. They want to be there. They have an interest in growing with the organization, with me, with the position, and that they have something to contribute, hopefully with skills that are complementary to me and what I already have on the team.
Awesome. Ruby, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm building on Karen's feedback. It's not just the resume. Before the resume comes the cover letter. And if you have the opportunity to add that, that is exactly what Karen is asking. Don't give me a bullet which is not going to explain the impact, only the deliverable, or perhaps you did it. Sure, that's wonderful. But what was the impact? So when you're trying to deliver message about yourself, that's your sales pitch or your elevator pitch, provide that example of impact in the cover letter. And I fully agree. I am a big proponent of giving others a chance, even if there isn't any experience. Frankly speaking, some of the best folks I've heard were not in the field and they were geniuses at their work. So I definitely look for something which is concise, but with an example and impact.
Yeah, I appreciate those additions. I also want to reiterate a cover letter. I'm a huge proponent of cover letters, and I don't think people do them very often. They kind of think they're extra, and yeah, they are extra. That's the point. They are extra, and they show not only that you want the job and you've put in the effort, but it allows you to elaborate on your experiences, because the resume is bullet pointed typically, and it's difficult to convey all the things you did and the impact. So please do write cover letters.
If I may add one more point quickly, as you think about cover letter or resume, it also shows your hiring manager how very deeply you looked at the job description. What you mentioned, Kristen, was using the right words, figuring out what is the right components that you need to pick and highlight. That also showcases your analytical skills. So put these pieces together as you get started into this journey. Right off the bat, you're looking at success.
Great. And just to open it up, Pavel or Ailey, do you have anything to add, since you were earlier on in your careers and you've probably written resumes more recently?
I would just maybe add to the cover letter part. One thing that's very important is, in the age of AI, is not think that cover letter can be written by AI better than by yourself. And when you have to bring your own inspiration to why you care about that particular position. So, like, don't use a boilerplate cover letter for every single job. It's really about thinking, like, imagining yourself in that position and then writing whatever comes to mind, like why you're excited about joining that company. And of course, what, to what others have mentioned, what successful stories you have done that can, be relevant to that particular job.
Yeah, I was was kind of wondering if there's like a structure that you guys have seen work really well in the cover letter. Like I know you want to include impact and on what you've done, but is there like a structure, like a way to start it off, include the impact in the middle, and end it that you kind of like?
I personally would like to see you introduce yourself in the most concise manner, but deliver that introduction. Do include one or two examples where you think that you have either had greatest impact by learning something new, or you delivered something which was profound, at least for you, even if it might not be fully applicable to the job at hand. And then close by saying, if I can do this, I can also do the job that you're applying for. So again, that is also about delivering the impactful communication. And so in that, you're going to be able to convince me that I should be looking at your resume. And then I will go to the resume and look at the bullet form, 3-4 sentences, top of the line. And then I'll be like, okay, I got you. Let's put this on a different pile level than where the rest of the pile is.
Yeah, I don't have a specific format. Sorry, I don't have a specific format I'm looking for, but I agree. I want to kind of know who you are, what you've done that's meaningful, impactful. And I also want to know, I'm going to try to figure out, do you really want the job? And maybe this goes more to the stepping stone discussion. But, I'm looking for somebody that wants to work with me, not necessarily forever. I get that. But if I'm going to take a chance, and whether I'm at a big company or a little company, it's an investment. It's an investment in my time. It's an investment in the team. And it is disappointing if someone comes in and doesn't really care about the job. So I will say I spend time trying to glean who is really, truly interested. And I'll go, I'll go beyond the cover letter and your resume and look in my network to see if there's somebody that I know who knows you. And they know exactly what I'm going to ask.
You spy. It's good to know. It's good to know. And thank you for the opening to stepping stone jobs, because that's kind of the next topic that I do want to get into. And while, so I'm going to start with Pavel on this one, because he recently transitioned from a field application scientist to a business development manager. And I want to ask, do you see the FAS position as a stepping stone job typically? And what skills did you personally identify as transferable when you were applying to business development positions?
Yeah, field application scientist positions are very, very much conventionally thought of as stepping stone positions, transitionary positions, because it's you still with one foot you're still kind of in the lab, or at least in your customer's lab, and with the other foot you're in the world of the real, in the commercial world, interacting with all kinds of different colleagues, from sales to marketing to product development and so on. So in my case, I think I've applied, having transitioned to business development now, the skill that was very important is customer interactions and relationship building. So FAS have to do that. They have to be very good at those, being trustworthy, having high integrity, and building those deep connections on behalf of the company. But they're still not the only person who manages that relationship. That job is in the business development. It's looking for new business. So I think I tried when I was applying for a business development role is really to communicate that I am eager to, maybe put aside some of that technical stuff and really focus on building those deep connections with people and driving the business forward.
And how did you convey that? Did you know somebody already?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the best way I conveyed that, I was being very honest. I also said, I need to get more practice at kind of being uncomfortable in front of others. And I this is something I haven't done too much of as field application scientist. As business development, I would get much more of that opportunity. So that resonated with the hiring manager, in the sense that I didn't say I wanted to do sales. I said, I'm interested because I know I could learn and grow in that role. I think that kind of resonated in that case.
And more specifically, though, is how did you even get that message through to them in the first place? How did you get them to even look at your resume in the first place? Did you write a cover letter?
So honestly, this was a one of those easy apply things, which sometimes happens, and you strike gold. Sometimes it doesn't, and this was just the right place, right time in my case. So I did write for other positions cover letters, and those did get me interviews. So I totally, I would never say that cover letters are meaningless or at all. This was just without one, fortunately for me, I guess.
While we're on the FAS topic quickly, what other kinds of jobs can an FAS typically go for after that?
Oh yeah, it's so many. Practically anything you can think of. You can if for some reason you didn't like traveling too much, you can go back and be a researcher. That's okay. You can remain an FAS, and there are career FAS who just hop from one job to another because they just want to learn new technologies. You can do marketing if you just feel like you're a perfectionist and you want to perfect that PowerPoint slide deck or something. You can transition to sales like I have, but so many others, I think. But those are the key ones.
Yeah, I want to advocate for brand new people getting their PhDs to definitely check out field application scientists or specialists as your first job, especially if you don't know what to do, because you can really pivot to basically any job after that.
Yeah, truly.
And it teaches you a lot about the business side of things as well, which you kind of don't get otherwise.
Yeah.
So then I want to transition talking to Ailey, because you also transitioned from a PhD program straight into medical writing. And so why did you choose medical writing? There were so many things to choose from. And did you feel that this was a good stepping stone job as an early graduate?
Yeah, definitely. I did basically exactly what you outlined in the beginning on your slide. I did informational interviews. I talked to medical writers. I talked to science writers. I talked to people who did marketing, people who did science communication. I didn't know anything about those positions, and so I wanted to learn more about them because I always really liked the communication side of science, presenting, writing papers. And so I did a bunch of informational interviews, and got a pretty good idea that that's sort of what I wanted to do. And then it just so happened that an agency in the area was looking for a medical writer, and I happened to know that I went to graduate school with someone who worked there, and that kind of got me in, and I felt like it was a great stepping stone job. It kind of like introduced me to marketing. Got me in the door for my first like marketing job and communications job, and it ultimately wasn't the thing that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but it was a great stepping stone to then science writing and more kind of work in the biotech industry. So it got me that experience, definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
And then so I want to turn it over to Karen and Ruby. So from your perspectives as hiring managers, if a good candidate is using your job as a stepping stone, maybe you don't know that, they know that, you don't know that yet, and they don't necessarily plan on staying in the position long term, so maybe no more than 3 years in their own mind, and they're uncomfortable just lying to you, and they want to be honest. But in the interview, they're asked a question about their long-term goals. What's your 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? How can someone go about answering that without it sounding like they're using you? How about Ruby? Start with Ruby. I know that she has an answer for this.
Well, first and foremost, I don't think any job is a use. Every job is a stepping stone, because every job should be a path to your growth, not only to the company growth. So frankly speaking, before that interview gets to that question, why don't you get ahead of it and ask this question instead? How do you see this role growing in next 3 to 5 years? You will have a very good answer in terms of not only that, are you a good fit for that job, but is that job a good fit for you because you are looking for growth? Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us will be willing to take a job where they're going to give us a job where we are going to be simply belaboring over the same details for 3 straight years and not look for growth. So let's go there first. Secondly, if you are that honest person, and I would frankly hope that every one of you will be, that is refreshing honesty. That is honesty on your part. You're being very genuine in that growth. And frankly speaking, if the interviewer thinks that you are needed more than 3 to 5 years in this crazy innovative growth phase of our market and job market, then they should be happy that you are honest and will enable you in that growth. That is where you will be happy and you will do your best work. So in the case of the interviewee answering the question of 3 to 5 years, where you talk about your vision, but be very clear about how you want to answer, how this job is part of that vision and why. Again, the why has to be part of you learning and delivering certain deliverables in that job, where you are also enabling the growth of whatever job is trying to hire you for. I will pause now.
Yeah, we're all thinking about it now. And Karen, do you have anything to add?
So I'm sensitive to this one. I guess it's what's meant by the word stepping stone. And maybe it's because I tend to stay in positions longer than some, unless situations cause something different. But I think there's a difference between a title and a position versus a company change. And I have had people recently say to me, I'm here to get some experience because I want to open my own consulting firm in 2 years. That's a little bit of a turnoff, I have to say, because you've told me before you have any idea whether or not you're even going to like the job and the company that you're planning on leaving before you're even here. And people have actually lost positions, lost opportunities at our company for answering that way. So I think you do need to be careful to make sure that you understand the question that's being asked. And I'm all for growth and have experienced growth myself. But I think, again, because, again, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into hiring someone, particularly if it's in a small organization. And you're investing in that person and you're hoping that that person is also that it's a good fit and you're invested together in moving the company and the goals and if that happens, then growth should be natural for everyone. There should be opportunities because everything's happened and going well.
So here was the example, because I was actually speaking to someone who was applying for medical science liaison positions recently. I just spoke with her last week, and she wasn't getting the jobs, and I don't even think she was getting the interviews. She was doing all the right steps that we talked about, but she felt that what she was applying to, she really needed clinical experience, and that's what she was lacking in terms of the positions she was applying to. So she needed a transitional job to gain that experience. But she was very nervous about this question about where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because for her, if she were answering honestly, she would say, I see myself as a medical science liaison. And obviously she doesn't want to just come out and say that. Plus, I'd really like to just learn some clinical work here so that I can get this other position. How would she say that in a way that isn't a turnoff?
Well, I think there's a way to start to say that she's very interested in clinical. She's very interested in, and why is she interested in clinical? Not because she's trying to get another job in clinical, but what is it? Because medical science, medical writing has a clinical aspect to it. So there has to be some reason beyond wanting that particular job, why that field is interesting. So articulating that and saying, and I think this is a way for me to not only get that knowledge and to apply my impactful previous experience, but then I think it's okay to say, and I'm really looking forward to learning even more about the field. I'm in regulatory, and I'm old enough that when I was in college, what the heck was regulatory? There was no career in regulatory. There was no programs in regulatory. So when somebody asked me the first time about it, or when I've been interested in other areas, sometimes I don't even know what I don't know. So I think it's okay to tell people you're trying to figure out, you have this particular interest, you're trying to grow your experience here, and you're excited about all the opportunities that are potentially out there, because this is what clinical means to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, by the way, she may get in that situation and be like, well, I thought I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I had no idea there were these other 7,352 other things I could do, let alone what's coming down the pike in the next years. And
so maybe keep an open mind, because you
Yeah.
might think this is a stepping stone in one direction, but you might go in another direction. So really just keep it open and talk about what you plan to learn.
Yeah, and if you can answer it honestly, people can usually tell when you're answering something honestly, even if it's not a perfect answer. And that's something I'm looking for. So why are you interested in clinical? What about it is really interesting to you? Did you have an experience? You know, is there something in your family's life? Is there something that, you know, happened when it can be just about anything to show how you can articulate your passion.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to move on now to talking about gaining experiences, maybe within your position, not necessarily taking a new one. But I'm going to start with Karen here again. It seems like from an outsider's perspective, and we're going to talk about a regulatory, that it's unlikely to be hired within a regulatory position without a good amount of regulatory experience. But what is the reality there? What background and experience does someone really need to pivot into an early career regulatory role? And where can someone kind of start and train for that?
So I think it's really interesting that you asked that question, and you did it off of my LinkedIn profile. So let me start by saying that my first two companies that I worked with were in unregulated industry. So they were not the companies themselves were not regulated. So then it wasn't until my third company that I went into a regulated environment. And I will spend just a couple minutes telling some true stories. I can't see anyone other than the other panelists, but I'm going to be honest. So as I was going into my job interview, I realized that the company itself was not the company I thought it was, which sounds odd, but there are so many companies that have very similar names and positions. So anyway, I went through the interview, and it was my first interview with a regulated company in biotech for in vitro diagnostics. And I had an idea and had done some research and kind of understood this. But during my interview, I was asked questions like, please describe the difference between myocardial infarction and B-natriuretic peptide diagnosed heart failure. And I kind of was like, well, I think myocardial infarction is when you're having a heart attack. I mean, you're talking to a non-medical person. I'm a PhD. I had really, truly no idea other than family history. And I must have had about 5 questions like that. Cried after the job interview, was asked back and did not want to go. And the second interview was asked by marketing, what scares you the most about this job? And I said, honestly, that it's regulated, and I'm worried about messing up and doing something that could cause an issue with the Food and Drug Administration. Honest. And they were like, oh, don't worry about that. We got people for that. So much to my surprise, I got the job. And I was asked by my new boss to write a bio that he could send out, including the reasons why he hired me, for which I had no idea. So when I sent my bio to him, he actually came back and said, this doesn't include anything about X, Y, and Z, which was like, well, God, now I know why you hired me. He went on to tell me that I certainly wasn't the smartest person who interviewed, but he appreciated my sense of humor. And that also helped, and my honesty, and that helped me get the job. One of the best jobs I've ever had. He became a great friend and mentor. We still keep in touch, even though it's many jobs later. So I think, some of it is don't overthink it. Don't say no to possibilities. Do you need to have all that experience? No. After 2 years at the company, it was acquired by a third party. I was working in marketing, by the way, not regulatory. I had met and worked with a lot of different people in the company by that time and had built a lot of relationships helping out with developing clinical trials, helping with develop early product specifications that we thought would be useful to industry when working with key opinion leaders. And when we were acquired, about 2 months in, someone came and said, we need somebody to lead regulatory affairs at this location. Keep in mind what was my biggest fear during my job description. And they were like, we think you'd be perfect. And so I would say, honesty, not being willing to be out of your comfort zone, not being afraid to try new things. And again, I had to ask, what is it about my skills that you think helps me be qualified? And some of it was, as a marketing person, my interaction with regulatory affairs. Out of 32 marketing people, I was one of the few that had a positive relationship with regulatory and was still able to get my job done. And it was because I would approach my interactions with them saying, I don't want to make a mistake, but I need to get from A to C. I don't care if I do it this way or this way. Help me do it compliantly, but I have to achieve our corporate goal as well. And we worked together on that. I ended up being in conferences with the FDA because of that. And that really helped grow my career. So do I think you need to have a lot of experience? I'm a great example of no. And I just helped place 2 other people in regulatory affairs positions, one at a director level who have 0 direct regulatory affairs experience, but who are both good thinkers, who have good bench experience, who are good communicators, and who can write, for example, an entire analytical portion of a submission. And I fully believe they can learn to draft the rest.
Okay. So, okay. Like, that was a lot to digest. In terms of those people that you just helped then, so they did have some related skills there, and in regulatory specifically. And so would you say then that there is some needed? I mean, like, you can't go into it. I mean, you did because you were offered that internally. They already knew you. You weren't applying for an external position. It's a little bit different when you have to put your skills on your resume.
These 2 people had no direct regulatory experience. They had bench experience.
Okay.
But they each had some quality experience. They had worked in, and here's how I would position it, right? Mm-hmm. They understood design controls. They understood 21 CFR 820. They understood ISO 13485. But they could explain how design controls would help write or work with a submission. They understood enough of the pieces. They could go look up on the FDA website what goes into a regulatory submission. And they were like, I could write the heck out of that section.
Okay.
I know how to communicate the bench work. I can read decision summaries. Even if it's just the analytical portions, I can read that. I can write the heck out of that. I know how to conduct those experiments. I know how to explain why that analytical performance matters clinically because I have that experience. I've never done a regulatory submission before, but to be able to translate writing, understanding of a piece of it, and understanding that piece of it really well, which may be very complementary to what your boss has a background in, that's very helpful as well. And then we teach each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it sounds like using those steps that I outlined before, it does take a lot of research on knowing what the role is, period. Looking up a lot of what these terms mean and boiling it down to what it actually is. And then seeing if, you have those skills, which you likely do have. Great. Thank you so much for going into all of that. Ruby, I want to move to you and your time at MedImmune. So fairly early in your career, you were able to lead a team of 6 research associates. And many people, including someone like myself, I found it difficult to be accepted in leadership positions when you don't actually have firsthand experience leading a team and no one underneath you. So how should someone go about gaining that leadership or management experience?
So full transparency, this was a mid-sized company, startup to a slightly mid-sized company where it got acquired by MedImmune. at one point. And it was then I was in charge of only one lab, which was class 10,000 lab, and I was working on infectious disease, R&D to GLP and what have you. Now I'm a little structured in my approach of things. If I'm doing infectious disease and research, obviously you need to have certain technique to be able to do that, meaning aseptic technique. You're not getting yourself sick. After the acquisition, I think a lot of the research associates, many of them quit. And so in that case, I was working a lot of hours. And very quickly, it turned out to be the entire facility was 3 labs, which were class 10,000 labs. And I needed people to help me get the work done. And we were hiring them. And very quickly, I was training all of them and also managing quite a few aspects of that entire facility by myself with the help of one manager. And that was the full team, 2 people, and very quickly hiring. The gist of this is that there were gaps left. And if in a startup zone or mid-sized zone, if there's a gap, you're in it to win it, or you're not in it. Because failure is a failure, and failure of one aspect of that entire company is going to lead the company down the tubes. And so I saw a gap and I'm like, no, this needs to be done. Step in, get it done. And very quickly, we were changing a lot of things about that facility and led that initiative as well. Little did I know, I didn't know much about SOPs. I didn't know much about facilities. I was writing it all. I was figuring out how to get things done. Project management was happening by me, and I did not know that I was doing it. And so in that, when you see a gap, fill it. Strive to do it well. If there's an initiative you see and you're like, oh, this is very interesting, I'm going to learn something, go in there genuinely to deliver. And when you deliver, you will see the impact. When you're communicating with passion and energy and trying to get things done, that is observed by everybody around you. They will see your leadership.
Do you think it's something that you have to first speak to your manager about and say, hey, I want to do this? Or should you just kind of go for it and fill that gap? And then once you've started to do it, then speak with your manager about making this official?
It would be situational. I think there are times when managers are being managed by you versus the other way around. In this case, I would say I was managing certain management aspects of it. And so I was telling them, hey, we need to do this. We need to get it done. They'll be like, okay, get it done. So you get it done. Or you're like, okay, this needs action now. So you get it done because it is important and very critical to get it done now. But keep them in the loop. Keep them in the loop at all aspects. You do not want your senior management to feel like you're siding and sliding them out of information or anything such. Your intent is positive. You work with them. Build a rapport with your senior management. They wouldn't understand in that case if you had a very quick judgment call to make that you got things done slightly differently and they were called a little bit later or looped into an email later. So I think leadership is, while it is becoming a bit of a buzzword, it is also about thinking about your judgment call. What is it that needs to be done? Getting it done. Getting things done is all part of it. And in that, you're influencing. In that, you're also trying to rally folks around you. In that is collaboration. In that is connecting the dots. And in that, you're leading the entire effort to completion. And it will be observed and people will easily transition you in there, in that leadership role. Beyond that, if there is an organization that you're working in and you're doing initiative after initiative, you're trying to get these things done, you are influencing and communicating it really well. Communication is important. You do want to get things done, but you need to be visible as well, not just behind the closed doors, okay? So that's important. So if that's not recognized in an organization, find an organization that will. Hope I answered your question. You're on mute, by the way.
And it sounds like Karen also worked at a startup early on. And I noticed she rose up in the ranks very quickly because she probably also wore a lot of hats and also filled a lot of those gaps. So would you recommend that people, if they're looking for those opportunities to really start looking hard at startups and not start at some large company where there might not be as many opportunities?
I think it depends on the person and the opportunity. I love me a good startup. It's fun. I love that but it's not for everyone. You know, my husband has worked at large pharma. He's worked at the Burnham. He's worked at startups, and he's a chemist, and he has a different feeling. Like, he gets frustrated sometimes at a startup because he wants to move. He wants to have more instrumentation or modalities on site instead of having to do send out, so he can move faster in his particular area of expertise. So I think it really depends. And then there's a risk level to startups. How long's the runway financially? What kind of investor support do you have? Is the company already on Series E funding? Those kinds of things. What's the vision of the CEO? What's the rest of the suite look like in terms of getting the work done? And, you know, what do you think the success is in terms of actually getting that first product on the market and then having it sell? But I love it because there is a lot of opportunity. You know, I've worked in 3 startups now. And I've been all over the place: regulated, non-regulated, marketing, clinical, R&D, manufacturing, regulatory, quality, all because of being in situations where there's so much to do. As Ruby said, step up and do it. And I think more than once, and I was smiling, Ruby, because I'm thinking, I'm going to guess you have jobs on your resume that you were doing before, you know, you were doing them before you even realized you were doing them and had the title, and it came later. Or somebody was already like, you're running X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, I think about it. And you're like, oh, no, I guess I've been doing that job for 6 months. So, you know, I think you have to decide what's your risk tolerance. Is the position in that environment the best thing for you? And what are you comfortable with? What do you want to do?
Kristen, if I may, I just wanted to add to Ruby's point about, you know, stepping up and doing the work. I just want to maybe a word of caution there, because the second situation which Ruby described is where you may do the work, but if you're doing it behind closed doors, and it may not be recognized, you got to be very cognizant of that as well. Or sometimes the leadership may not always be receptive to the things that you're trying to do and may not recognize you for those efforts. So it really is situation dependent. And in startup case, sometimes, yes, there's always more to do, but in terms of leadership or just how much money is available, you may not be able to jump in the ranks because you're necessary for the position that you were hired. So you may end up doing more, but you may be still doing that on top of everything else that you've been hired to do. So it really depends on the trajectory of the company.
I think that's a really good, like a super good point. And you have to ask yourself, again, what motivates you? Is it title? Is it financial? And of course, that motivates a lot of us. But if there's other things where, for me, if I'm still in a growth opportunity, but it is not, I can say in most instances where the startup, with the startup environment, we've absolutely had hiring freezes. We've absolutely had salary freezes. So, you know, you have to find other ways to be motivated or decide to move on.
Thank you. And I'm going to transition now to talking about starting a business or a consultancy. I'm sure there's some people out there that are thinking about this. So I'm going to start with Ailey here. So we actually have very similar career backgrounds. We both went straight out of academia into science communication roles. We both worked at what's now CG Life. And we leveraged our experiences to start businesses after only a few years. And so what made you feel that you were ready? I mean, really, only after a few years, what made you feel that you were ready to go out and start your own business and consultancy? What were your motivations for pulling the trigger? Because it is scary. And then how did you factor in the risks of going out on your own?
Yeah. I had always wanted to start a business. I think when I was at the bench in lab, I was really focused on like getting an academic position, being a professor, And once I threw that out the window and jumped into science communication, I got experience working at marketing agencies and just like figuring out how they run, what makes a team successful, what types of projects do they take on, and also like carving out my niche as a science writer and SEO. So I think after kind of getting my sea legs at like marketing agencies, in the biotech and pharma industry, I think that kind of gave me the confidence, and that idea of starting my own agency sort of like bubbled up. I think my motivations were really, around freedom. I think that's anyone who starts a business, I think, really wants the freedom to work with who they want to work with. For me, my industry is science writing, and I like being able to choose what science I'm writing about, who I work with. I also like being able to structure my day the way that I want to structure it. When I started my science writing business, Word Lab, I also had 2 young kids, and I wanted to be able to have the flexibility to sort of like, if one of them is sick, I can stay home with them, or just be able to kind of drop everything and fulfill their needs, rather than trying to like fit the needs of my family into my work schedule. I liked having that flexibility. I mean, in terms of being ready to start a business, I never felt ready. I still don't feel ready. It's like, I think for me, the major anxiety was around like finances. I was really worried about just not being able to bring in any business and not being able to pay the bills. I think one of the ways I kind of dealt with that was just saving money and building up like a 6-month runway, so that like, if I didn't bring in any business, if I didn't get any clients, we could still pay our bills for 6 months. So that certainly like helped my anxiety around that. I read a ton of books about starting a business. I also got a business coach, which I found really helpful, and I would really recommend to anyone who wants to start their own business and has never done it. She helped me just think about things that I had never thought about. Like I knew about, the legal implications of setting up, an LLC, or the tax implications, or how to run operations, how to contract work out to people, how to do accounting, all that stuff I knew I had to do, but I just didn't know how to do it practically. So she really helped me kind of keep all those tasks in order, and make sure they got done. But even with all that background, I still had, the day I launched, I was like, oh, I still had a ton of anxiety, and it's sort of it's a balancing act, balancing the excitement and the freedom with the anxiety.
So we have a question from the audience. As a consultant, how do you get business and ensure your pipeline doesn't dry up if you don't have time or people for business development? I mean, that's always an issue, right?
Always. Yeah. I mean, Chris,
ABC, always be selling or something like that. Closing, always be closing.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear your opinion on it, but for me, when I first launched, I just hit LinkedIn hard. I mean, people I had worked with at marketing agencies, I just reached out to them and said, "Hey, I'm on my own now. Let me know if you want to schedule a chat. Here are my services. I specialize in these things," and I just did that. I mean, every day for the first year, I just reached out to people I knew, friends of friends. It was a lot of LinkedIn messaging and stalking people on LinkedIn. And I had a pretty steady, like, I've been in business for 4 years. I would say just recently this year, with all the shakeups in biotech and a lack of investment money, like it's I've had to start doing that again and finding good clients. Yeah. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it, Kristen.
I mean, I say the same, LinkedIn, but also I like to go out in person. I like to go to conferences. I know a lot of people personally And, things like through Biotech Networks has a lot of in-person networking events, because it's about making those long-term connections. Because you can do an informational interview with somebody on LinkedIn or connect with them, but even if you do that interview for 30 minutes, they're not really going to remember you. So knowing people in person really helps for them to recommend you to someone else they know, and just to help keep that relationship going. And if you keep going out there to networking events and meeting people, you might not be meeting clients, but you're going to be meeting people that might know somebody that's a client, but you still want to keep that initial friendship going. And you have to look at it that way too, as friendships, because your friends are the ones that are going to recommend you for this or that. But your friends are the ones that believe in you. I mean, yes, it's a colleague type relationship, and there is a business aspect, of course, and you do have to still be professional, but there is a friendly aspect there as well to keep the connection going over time. So I've actually ramped that up for myself, and I'm out there more in person. My kids are really little right now too, so it's really difficult for me to get out there, but I'm doing my best. And definitely more LinkedIn presence for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, so I wanted to get to a couple other questions, but we have some audience questions that I think it's important to get to because the audience is here. One of them, actually, I'm going to turn that over. There's a good question that Pavel can answer, which is about international student or international workers. Has that, let's see, here's the question. Wondering if the panel here could share insights for international scholars. Does the work visa and immigration logistics often come as a hurdle or limitation to hiring? And if so, any suggestions on how to work around this? Have you encountered problems with this?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it's tough. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I've went through all the regular hoops. Was as a F1 student completing the PhD, then having however much time after you graduate to find a job in the field as soon as possible. Otherwise, you have you get the boot. Then convincing somebody to sponsor you for a work visa, which is subject to lottery. So ultimately, yeah, it's not easy, and there's no denying that. So the advice I would say to those folks is, in my case, I'll just share my experience. My job, my first real job in biotech that I got after I graduated, it started for me as a experience with the company's instrumentation before I did my PhD. It started in undergrad. So and it's then continued on through some connections that I've built over the years, through some informational interviews, through networking at a conference. So it was like a chain of serendipitous events that led me to that job. And I encourage everybody who finds themselves at this kind of disadvantage of being an international student to think back at all the things you've done over the last few years, all the people you've met, and if you still have time, you do that. And one way or another, it will figure itself out. And another practical more advice: large companies would likely not want to sponsor you for a visa. That's really, like, I'll give one example. Like, I interviewed with a Thermo Fisher. I'm not saying like Thermo blanket doesn't support international students, but for that specific position, the first question was, "Hey, do you need a sponsorship?" I'm like, "Yes," and they're like, "Thank you," and then it was like that. So smaller companies are much more likely to sponsor you for a visa, and if you happen to have the right fit for what they're looking for.
So if I may share, I'm a Canadian. I came from Canada as a temp on my first job. Showed up with a small suitcase and very little cash in my pocket. My personal experience was au contraire to Pavel's, and that was that large pharma sponsored me. So Genentech enabled my green card here, and I'm a green card holder. My recommendation would be keep an eye on regulations at all times. All these H-1B and other visa regulations do go through changes. And as you very well know, in past 8 years, they have certainly gone through a ringer in terms of quotas or numbers or prioritized countries and what have you. Sure, I'm a Canadian, that could have looked easy, but I'm also born in India. So Indian borns were not prioritized. And so think about the timing, the job you're taking, and frankly speaking, it depends on the circumstance. When I went to Genentech, biotech was just coming up, booming. So that was enabled. But in Pavel's case, it could have been different. And also, the training difference and what have you, or my difference in being able to get that temporary visa and being able to get some experience. So circumstance matters. Keep an eye on regulation. And yes, see wherever you can be sponsored, but keep an eye on all opportunities that you can get your foot into that one job, which you actually can deliver on and have a positive experience with as well. Kristen, you're on mute.
Thank you. So we're going to go to another audience question. And also, I want to let the audience know that after this session, Ruby and Karen will be in one session room, and Ailey and Pavel will be in another session room. So if you do have more questions specifically for them, you can join them in those session rooms right after this is over. We'll probably be in here for just another 5 minutes or so. We just have a couple more audience questions to get to. I also want to give a plug to Pavel really quick because he just started an FAS Resource Center for potential FASs. So if you want to connect with him on LinkedIn, he can go ahead and give you the link to that. And also, Ailey started Science Vibes, which is this really cool art-inspired, science art inspired wall art and t-shirts now, and it's really cool stuff. So go check out Science Vibes or connect with Ailey as well, and he can send you the links to that. And so this question is probably more for Ruby and Karen. What is the biggest change in the hiring trends that you've seen over the last couple of years, especially with the strain on biotech and pharma funding? And how can candidates set themselves apart from the sea of talent currently available in the market? Because there have been a ton of layoffs lately. And so I know a lot of people are applying, and sometimes you'll see 100 applications for one job or more.
So I'll just say, I know it's hard, but try not to let that discourage you. I'm not sure I know anyone who hasn't gone through a reduction in force, a layoff. I've been there. Pretty much all my friends have been there. But I also want people to be encouraged by the fact that there are still companies that are growing and new companies coming every day. And with COVID, a lot of people have learned that they can hire great talent that can be remote. So I am trying to, on my LinkedIn posting, be more conscientious about passing along job opportunities. I just posted 2 today. One is with the Food and Drug Administration, and they're one organization that have started doing a lot more remote hiring. So take a look at that. It's actually for project management, which, maybe not something that you would have thought of with the FDA. And the person who originally posted it, Josh, he's actually an FDA alum, and also kind of gave some color as to what the job might entail. So don't limit yourself to the traditional places of looking for opportunities. There's lots of government agencies that need biotech professionals. There's also a lot of pharma companies that are still hiring, though maybe not directly in wherever you may be. Again, there's remote opportunities, and they don't always place them where you think that you're going to find them. So there are list servers, there are groups that put out newsletters every day. So the one I'm thinking about right now is called Agency IQ. I'm not affiliated with them, but they have a regulatory newsletter that comes out every other day for the US and one for the EU. And at the end, they summarize open positions, usually with pharma, but they're not just in regulatory and quality, and they often include FDA jobs as well. So I do think that I see the layoffs. I feel for everyone. I've been there myself, but there are hiring opportunities as well. And I'm going to stick to the first question and answer and say, if you can show me that you're interested, and I think this is true for a lot of the folks in my network and my circle, that you're really interested in the position and how you're going to be impactful, how you've been impactful in the past, that really does set you apart. And I see, you know, many resumes. A lot of them, they've been told you can only have one page. I don't know who made that rule up. I mean, it doesn't want to be 30 pages, but do you make sure that you get your message across, get your cover letter across. Having a string in our world of just standards tells me nothing. I'd much rather you cut out 5 lines of standards and tell me one more thing about yourself and how you've made an impact on the past, how it's going to translate to me now, and where you want to be going forward, or to any company where you want my help. And don't forget to network. Network. Don't be afraid to use your network on LinkedIn. You know, what's the worst somebody can do? Ignore you or say they can't help you. That's the very worst thing that can happen.
Well said, Karen. What are they going to say? No? Have that attitude. And this is a cliche, but I will say it. You will miss every shot you choose not to take. Okay? So don't overthink it. Just do it. Like I said, I came here with a small suitcase and I was a temp. And even at that temp job, people were like, oh, she's a temp. She can do this and she can do that. Well, that's fine. But I was learning how pharma operated. I was learning how this was structured. I did quality. I did clinical research. I did research, all of it. And I figured it out. I was there for 1 year. It's about learning. In terms of tangibles in current environment, true, small biotechs are dry on funding, including mine is low and low. How do you differentiate? If small biotechs are low on money and some of them do want to hire, they're looking for diversity in your experience or your can-do attitude. Okay, so 3-4 tangibles. Go in with positive can-do attitude, show that you're willing to learn, show that you can deliver with even your non-related experience. And last but not least, remember one thing, biotech is not done in garage. It is a collaborative effort. It is multiple people talking constantly. Regulatory doesn't happen in garage. You know, science doesn't happen alone in garage. It needs to go places to build a company. Show that collaborative attitude. And in that, you're going to be able to also insert some of those technical skills. Being able to really do something magical with Excel matters. Being able to work in smart sheets or figuring out how MS Suites can empower this Power BI stuff. I learned in my current job how to figure out MS Suite and be able to do all the IT work for SharePoint. I implemented SharePoint. So suddenly I'm a little bit of IT as well. 24 years later in the system, in this career. But hey, learning is the attitude to go in with. And so take a shot anyways. Get out there, like Karen said at the end, network the hell out of it. Pardon my rude. You're on mute again, Kristen.
I know. We're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much to the panelists. Again, if you want to talk to them and ask some questions, there are definitely more questions from the audience, so there will be people in there. Please visit them within the session rooms. And I guess we are going to turn this off. Mary's in the background doing that. Thank you, Mary, for inviting all of us to the panel. I had a really good time. I learned a lot, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and do some speed networking.
I'm going to try.
Sounds great. Yeah, the panel went really well.
And I've got signs
so
and all this stuff open and another computer, so already looking.
All right, great. So go over to the sessions in the left menu, and you can meet the panelists. And we also have a bunch of other rooms there. It's like a Zoom room. You can either turn your camera and audio on or off. And you can also start the speed networking. So thank you to all the panelists and to Kristen. It was a great panel.
Agreed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
all
Bye.
in the other areas.